your transportation vision. I've heard you say it a few times. You'll make a decision. Are we rolling? You'll make a decision on council and back it up with, this fits with my view of where we need to be in regards to transportation. I've heard you say that a few times now.
Yeah, 100%, because I honestly believe that a cohesive transportation strategy in government is the solution to so many of our problems. That if we're able to build out the city around, transportation-oriented development, that so many of the frustrations that people have with the tremendous growth that Tampa is experiencing would be resolved.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's a little bit of a chicken versus the egg scenario. Do we need a full subway system in Tampa today? No, right? There's no demand necessarily. The funding wouldn't be there. There's so many issues and there's so many reasons why that wouldn't happen, but the people are moving here. We need to plan for it.
Well, I think it's incrementalism. You have to start somewhere. And that's part of the problem, is everybody keeps kicking the can down the street. One of the things that I bring to council is, let's get it done.
Yeah.
Let's start.
Right.
We just have to get it done. Somebody has to bite the bullet. Somebody, in all of these cities that have, tremendous built out systems, there was a lot of pushback. MARTA in Atlanta. You go around the country, you go around the world, and you see these great transportation systems. When they were first put in, people were like, they were naysayers. Oh, we don't need that. We don't, the metro system in Washington, D.C., a lot of naysayers when that was first put in. But somebody has to bite the bullet and says, we're going to start here. This is what we're going to do because it's critical for the infrastructure and the future of the city. And that's what I can perceive this as my role on city council.
In Vancouver, I think Vancouver is the only city in North America that kept their original streetcar line of the early 1900s.
Yeah.
And during I think it was the late 40s is when they ripped them all up in Tampa, all these lines in Tampa. And I think it was around that same time in Vancouver as well when they were discussing ripping them up. Mm-hmm. Well, there was a lot of pushback. We need to rip these up. We're going into a car-centric world,
right.
Yada, yada. They didn't, and thank God they didn't, because today they enjoy this incredible network.
Right.
I think it's the largest streetcar network for sure in North America, maybe the world.
It's a great system, and Vancouver's actually I've
always wanted to go.
I've traveled extensively in all over the world, and Vancouver is one of my favorite cities. In every continent I've been to, Vancouver is one of my favorite cities.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Tampa City Councilman Alan Clendenin. Mr. Clendenin, thank you for being here today, and welcome to the show.
No, it's a pleasure being here. As we spoke earlier, I'm looking forward to it. I enjoy your podcast, and I enjoy the content. I watch it whenever you release a new video, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Well, thank you for that. I want to dig right into this transportation thing. This is something that has been a challenge for this area for at least as far as I can remember, probably long before I was born. What did you pull up here, David? Pacific Electric System in LA was the largest streetcar network in the U.S. with over 1,000 miles of track.
Wow.
And now Los Angeles, I'm not sure they even have a streetcar. I know they have a sort of subway, right?
Yeah, they're continuing to expand on that.
Right. Isn't it fascinating, though? I mean, Key West, Pensacola, Jacksonville, St. Petersburg, Tampa all had on-street rail networks, that were ripped up. And we've talked about that a lot on the show, the reasons why, the demand for vehicles, right? Funding issues. There's also, I don't even know if they're conspiracies. I think there's a lot of truth to them. Auto companies would buy the streetcar network, reduce the amount of trips and reduce the funding so that they would kind of go out of business, and then they'd rip the tracks up. It was
Now, see, I wasn't around that long ago, but Charlie Miranda was. So he could tell you all those details back in the early 1900s. But it's my understanding that some of the demand and why the streetcars were built out was kind of they were a customer of the electric companies that were building out. So there was excess electricity. And so there was a market to be able to sell electricity. So a lot of times the electric companies actually had these streetcar systems put in place. And of course, like Los Angeles is so sprawling, and even by scale, it was relative to other cities, it was sprawling back then. But I also believe that a lot of it was buses. So the bus manufacturers, about the decimation of the system around the country was the bus manufacturers as well, not just automobiles, but buses. And there was a lot of pressure from those factories and those companies
Right.
to pressure these, they would come in and say, oh, we've got this new shiny object that, to replace that old clunker of a system that you currently have.
And it doesn't have to follow a rail.
Yeah, exactly.
We can put stops wherever we want.
Exactly. Well, and there wasn't traffic back then. We didn't
It
have.
probably made sense at the time.
Correct.
I mean, realistically.
Yeah, I can't really criticize, and honestly, I don't necessarily believe, my number one objective since I've been on council, the first thing I did was take on the streetcar project. So the expansion of the streetcar project, when I first came in, the streetcar expansion was dead. It was deceased. It was 6 feet under. It was cold and rotting. I dug it up, did a little Frankenstein thing on it, and worked with the administration, worked with the mayor, and we've resuscitated it, and we're progressing slowly, painfully slowing. But the process is working, and I believe the place of the streetcar isn't going back to where we were with the streetcar, because I don't necessarily know that technology would apply to the citywide because of because of traffic, lanes, the speed, and how our expectations of getting from point A to point B today. But where the streetcar is really critical is within our urban core. When we expand the streetcar system, which we're going to expand this over my dead body, we're going to expand the streetcar system. So it's going to go up Florida, and initially it was just a Palm, but I've pushed it to go up to Columbus. So we're going to go North Florida to Columbus, turn left on Columbus, come back on Tampa Street, and loop all the way back down into the Central Business District to come back into the system by the Convention Center. It'll triple the amount of rail. Then people will be able to live Ybor Harbor, Channelside, Water Street, Encore, downtown, Convention Center, Tampa Heights, connecting all of Tampa's jewels. Armature Works, Straz, the Museum of Art, the Convention Center, the Aquarium, and again the Ybor City. And you can live, work, and play in that area completely car free. Mm-hmm. And when we get the Bright Line, which unfortunately is really delayed coming into Tampa, but we'll be able to have an east-west connection. You'll be able to get on the streetcar from the Bright Line terminus and connect, or we'll have another system that will be able to go east-west along Palm that you can connect on the other end of it as well. So it'll be a full network of when people come into our city via train, they will be able to connect to the system and not have a car. They won't have to worry about parking. If you live in Tampa Heights, you want to go to the Straz for a show, or you want to go to dinner, you can jump on the streetcar. You don't have to worry about parking. You want to go to the aquarium, you want to go into one of these great restaurants we have in Water Street, you can jump on the streetcar. So it's a great mechanism of transportation within the urban core. I don't believe that the streetcar system is the mode of transportation to take us like to USF or even to the airport. Because my next objective, once we get this thing further along, I'm going to be working with the airport and the administration to get that airport to downtown connection. And that's going to look, it's still to be determined what that looks like, whether it's a light rail system, whether it's street level, whether it's elevated, but it's going to be a different type of transportation. What I envision it, whatever we put there will be the first step in a bigger system that'll cross the bay and then go northbound. And after I'm probably long gone, but before I leave this office, I'm hoping to have that system well underway.
I love the energy, and I wish more people in local government would speak like you, because you sound like it's almost like a enough is enough type scenario.
Oh, enough.
Like we need to get this thing going.
Get it done.
Get it done.
This is what I feel. I mean, this is kind of how I approach government in general. Let's just get it done. We have to get people in a room, get them at a table, and say, this is a priority for the city of Tampa. Let's get it done. And because we're capable of doing it. We are the society that put people on the moon. We're the society look what we did with the vaccines for COVID in such a short period of time.
Exactly.
We can get stuff done when we have that will and determination. I believe that the will is lacking, but the determination is there.
Whenever anyone says we can't do that, or light rail will never be in Tampa, or we can't extend the streetcar, I always go, there's footsteps on the moon, and Correct. You're telling me we can't freaking figure out a way to extend a streetcar.
It's a couple pieces of steel and some electricity.
Let's not get crazy.
Exactly.
Let's start from the very top, though, because I really want to dig into the specific subject of the streetcar, and I also want to talk in a second about why was it dead. But David, could you pull up the map we always show? It was from 1918, Tampa Streetcar Network at its full build out. all throughout the urban core. My grandfather told me when he was little, he took a streetcar from Seminole Heights, where they lived, all the way down to Ballast Point.
Right.
So imagine that.
Well, they had that big pavilion back then.
But what you're saying is that might be viable, but it's certainly not a starting point, number one. And number two, it might not even need to reach that far because of today's automobiles, traffic, et cetera, et cetera.
Autonomous vehicles that are
autonomous
coming.
vehicles.
There's a lot of technology. There's a lot of other things that are different now from what we had back then.
Yeah.
At the time, that was the right system for the moment. Again, for traffic, the congestion on the cities, we just didn't have it back then. And also the working people that we had at the time, a nickel for a streetcar ride. It was a very different kind of time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily, again, I think that the streetcar in our urban core is the right mode of transportation for what we offer in that area of people that work, live, and play in that tight, congested area where we are parking challenged and we have so many amenities. But to be able to reach longer distances, there's other technologies that are more cost effective and more expeditious way of moving people.
You could pull it up on our Instagram page, or you got it, David. Yeah, just to kind of hash this out. We've talked about this a million times on the show, but I think it's important because sometimes people think, well, we don't need some new innovative idea. This is not a new idea. This was here over 100 years ago. And in fact, it was I think the largest network in Florida.
Yep.
And, you can go to some of these pictures of our downtown and you can see the different forms of transportation operating at the same time. Mm-hmm. In one picture, you've got someone riding a bike, someone driving a car, someone walking across the street, and multiple streetcars. This is not a novel idea.
I have a picture of the streetcar, the Swan Line, in my living room.
So you do? Okay. So you're a true fan then.
I am a true fan.
So David, try to zoom in on this just so we can see on Ward Maps, which is actually... Ward Maps is great. Anyone that wants a copy of this, they'll frame it for you. I bought this for the studio. It's the one that hangs here. But look at the scale, And what's really shocking is the area of the urban core that is north of where it says steam plant in the center, right, where the river kind of crests around to the right.
The reason Bayshard didn't continue down that way.
Well, but also that's where the interstate went in, right south of Armature Works.
Yep.
Look how dense. Look how many businesses, look how many homes, look how many rail lines were lost when those interstates came through our city. I mean, decimated the urban core. My view, I'm totally aligned with what you're saying. I see no reason why this extension you're discussing and talking about, that's just the first phase. I think you even connect it east to Ybor and make a loop.
Well, I think you could have another east-west line. You could, and what you see here in this concentrated urban area, and possibly even part of the challenge, of course, is going over the river on our existing bridges.
Sure.
And if you have to replace the bridges, the infrastructure cost is just so high. So that's kind of a natural cost barrier to us, is crossing the river. But within that urban area and expansion into, a little bit further north and a little bit further east. But again, the technology, we can do quicker transportation with light rail type of systems or other type of these autonomous vehicles that would probably be able to, again, get us to the airport, be able to get up into Seminole Heights proper and beyond, the Forest Hills and USF. USF, what's being developed on Fowler, that's going to be very intensive, and potentially the development that we could see in Sulphur Springs. We're going to want to connect all those areas with transportation, but people don't want to spend an hour to get from these locations to downtown. They want to do it in 10 or 15 minutes, and that's going to be a much quicker form of transportation, like a light rail.
Well, you've got to beat the car, right? I think the reason why a lot of people don't ride the bus is because you're sitting in traffic.
Yeah.
Would I rather sit in traffic with 5, 10, 20 other people, right, with some AirPods in, or would I rather be in my own air-conditioned car? Some people don't have that luxury, but in general, you've got to beat the automobile. Mm-hmm. And I think if you could be independent of an automobile, maybe you have a suitcase with you, a backpack, or nothing. Maybe you're going to a show at the Strass Center from Seminole Heights, right? In that scenario, now I don't have to deal with parking. Now there's a huge incentive to ride the streetcar.
You don't have to deal with parking. You don't have to deal with the stress of driving. And it's connectivity. Part of the bus problem is that it's not usually just one bus, it's multiple buses. And sometimes it could take you an hour and a half to get from one place to another in the city of Tampa because of the connection issues. So, and it's just the nature of the buses, and we don't have dedicated lanes. There's options of having, and maybe that is part of the option of having these rapid bus transit lanes where you have dedicated lanes, and you have, and what will probably end up being is autonomous type of buses running in that type of system. So you have to think outside the box. It's not necessarily what we see today, but what's coming tomorrow. And by the time we were able to build those things out, they could be autonomous lanes with automated buses running up and down Florida or running up and down Nebraska, getting up to Fowler. They're not necessarily connected by a rail, but they could be in their own lane.
And maybe it's better to have autonomous versus fixed rail, right? I would assume it's less expensive, right? There's substantially less expensive. Mm-hmm. But also, too, isn't a dedicated bus lane a natural progression to a rail line, right? Like, as an example, City Council, like you guys just voted to fund for 1 year Bus Route 1,
Route 1, yes.
which is USF to downtown, correct? Mm-hmm. That general area.
The most popular route.
Wouldn't it make sense that once that's established, people are used to using it? I know you've already had some good ridership increase because it's free. I think it actually surpassed the streetcar, which is kind of incredible.
Right.
I mean, it just shows you when it's free, people will use it, right?
Well, but it's new and free, so we don't know if those numbers will stabilize or fall. We have to have a longer track record to really be able to scientifically decide what the viability of that route and over a longer period of time. So just anything that's new, look at the Sunrunner in St. Petersburg, when it was new, the numbers were through the roof, and then they flattened out, and then of course they started charging and they bottomed out.
So this whole conversation about how to get from A to B, right? Mm-hmm. How do we get from where we are to an expansion and eventually service as many neighborhoods as we can in 100%, Tampa, right? That's obviously the goal. To start out, doesn't it kind of make sense that a bus line is the easiest way to go? Establishing, like, as an example, right? Bus Route 1, if you wanted to go from USF to downtown, get people used to using that route. Then you have a dedicated bus lane, maybe separated from the other lanes of traffic. Then eventually you put a curb and it's a real dedicated lane. Maybe it could even go through certain traffic lights, et cetera. And as you move forward, maybe that becomes a rail line.
Well, I think you nailed it in the beginning of the conversation, is you have to beat the car. And a lot of those other solutions just described is what beats the car. And I believe part of my observation in a lot of these transportation options is that sometimes we try to do things too quick and easy and they fail, and then people just write it off. You have to reach a certain critical point in the technology and what you're offering so that it has a reasonable chance of success so that people will support that mode of transportation. An example, there was a lot of push from Hart in lieu of doing the streetcar expansion, going back to what we've done and failed time and time again is a bus circulator. We've tried this over and over and over again. It fails every time. And what ends up being written off as a failure. And I was afraid that if we were to support something like that and it was a failure, then people would not support the streetcar expansion. But we see when you have a fixed guideway system, and even if that was a dedicated lane, you get transit-oriented development. People have predictability is key in transportation. When I travel, and again, I travel all over the world, I know that if I stand in front of a rail during the middle of the day, that in a short period of time, there's going to be something come by to pick me up. Within 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to get some. So predictability and frequency. We have to provide predictability and frequency. And I think that's part of where Hart's failure is, and it's not their fault. It's systemic in how we do the transportation, is they're incapable of providing the frequency required to really promote and have people ride their system. Our gaps in system, nobody wants that. If you have to wait in the hot sun or the pouring down rain in Florida for an hour for a bus, you're not going to do it again. You'll do it once and you'll never do it again. You have to have predictability and frequency. It's like the ferry. I'm not a big proponent of the current ferry system between downtown and St. Petersburg, which sounds kind of like people would probably be surprised to hear that because I'm such a transportation advocate. But the problem is it doesn't do enough. If we were able to fund a year-round ferry system that was predictable and more frequent, that provided a real, true transportation alternative to people who would live in one place and work in another, or live in a place and play in another, that I know that every hour on the hour, 365 days a year, I can stand at this pier and I can go from point A to point B, I think that would be a huge success for both Tampa and St. Petersburg. But having seasonal, I'm fairly involved in the city of Tampa. I could not tell you when that schedule is. When does it start? When does it end? I have no idea. So that's the death knell for these types of transportation. We have to be able to provide frequency and predictability.
We should have ferry systems all over Tampa Bay.
100%.
We should have one from Apollo Beach to the air base. I know a ton of people in the military that have to drive all the way around to get there. They would use it.
100%.
We need
that. We have the river. We've got
what are we doing? Our waterways are a
right.
fantastic transportation asset, and then
Every
they're just
major
totally
city in the world that
underutilized.
is surrounded by water uses their water for
Absolutely.
transportation, and we don't, and it's inexcusable.
But your point is, it has to be done the right way for people to actually use it, or for it to be worthwhile. Because
Otherwise, you're just throwing money away.
Any of these plans come with massive cost.
Correct.
And when you're spending,
somebody's got to suck it up.
Somebody's got to suck it up.
Somebody's got to suck it up.
Somebody's got to suck it up. So, David, can you pull up? And I want to go through, not extensively, but as long as you'll, or you're willing to share about this story with this expansion. It came out in the news a few years ago. They even had renderings of an updated streetcar. Mm-hmm. David, if you just type in federal grant Tampa streetcar, it should pull up that old article, because I think the federal government was going to give us a ton of money for this.
Yes, we still have money. It's not, if you go in, if you go into the documents, you won't see it tagged as streetcar, but there's still money reserved between the federal and state for us of matching funds. We just have to get the matching funds to do that. But there's a lot of things we have to do before that.
Sure.
I mean, there's an entire process, and that's part of my frustration with city government, is everything moves 10 times slower than, not just because it moves 10 times slower than it should. We should be able to move faster than we are.
Tampa awarded $1 million U.S. Department of Transportation grant for transit and housing needs, but this is probably this might be a separate
this is
thing.
recent. This is actually this is actually an accelerator grant. This is part of the streetcar. What we're using this money for is to do some of those things that have to happen before we get to actually construction. So this money is being used to have the consultant to be able to put this program all together. So this is part of this process.
Well, at the base level, the city can't do any of this on its own. Period. Right? The city can't fund its own streetcar network, its own ferry system, et cetera. Right?
Well, we actually could. There's a lot of things we could if we wanted. If there was the will, there's a way. The cost of the streetcar is growing rapidly, like everything else is. Inflation is hitting us hard across the board. Everything is literally 2 or 3 times more expensive than it once was. So we would have to use bonding. We'd have to use, tax money. And there's the CRA money. There's of getting our portion of the streetcar extension
right there.
Done.
Second article, Envision Tampa streetcar extension. So it's a matter of, instead of continuing the green spine, the bike lane for $3 million, there's a portion that could be allocated towards a project like this. It's
prioritization, and again, let's just get it done.
Right.
It's when somebody makes a determination that this is a priority for the city of Tampa, it gets done. So
is that a mayoral directive, or is it the position of council, or is it a planning organization?
The vision is generally the mayor is the administration, which is head of the administration is the mayor. The mayor is, all the staff works for the mayor. So it requires the mayor to basically assign work and get something. And I will, to this mayor's credit, like I said, when I first came in 2 years ago, this process was dead. So between me working with the mayor and the administration, we've resuscitated. We've dug it out of the ground. It is moving. It's just moving at a glacier's pace.
And is the reason why it's not at the top of, well, we could ask her, but at the top of the mayor's list because there's roads, there's stormwater, there's public safety. There's just so many different things happening that, hey, yeah, the streetcar would be great, but it's not at the top of my list. Well, is that the reason it was dead?
I think a little bit of all of the above. I think that there's frustration. And, you realize where we were as well a couple of years ago. Priorities were maybe a little bit different, and you constantly are reevaluating where you are. Even today, the problem is the city can't just do one thing. We have to do a lot of things at the same time.
Yeah,
you just described it, and then we get hit by 2 hurricanes. So all of a sudden, what wasn't a priority a year ago is now a major priority. These pump stations, the flood control, all these things that we're doing right now, it wasn't even on our radar a year ago.
And the same thing with housing affordability. It was a little bit of a conversation pre-COVID, but most of the conversation seemed to be centered around transportation. Like at the mayoral election in 2019, it was all about transit, but then we had this incredible demand. Housing went up, and now everyone's talking, well, we need housing affordability.
Well, I'm on the other side of this one.
Sure.
Because I don't believe that government's role is in the affordable housing. One, the government, my experience is government cannot beat the market. We cannot, we are constantly behind where economic indicators. If we try to get into the market, we are 3 years behind where everybody else is at. And it is a failure in government to try to do that. What the role of government, what should we be doing? We should be providing you clean water. We should be taking the dirty water out of your house. We need to be picking up your trash. We need to be giving you good roads. We need to be paving your roads. We need to be filling your potholes. We need to be doing sidewalks. And guess what else we can do? Transportation. If we can provide viable, frequent, predictable transportation that people will take, they don't need to have a car, lower their transportation costs. Right now, folks, the cost in their budget, especially working people and poor people, is a disproportionate amount of their income. If we can reduce or eliminate that from their budget, they can afford housing. That is the role of the government. That the bigger infrastructure, the larger picture of when I keep hitting this mic, the bigger, because I use my hands. You think I was Italian, but I'm not. This bigger process, this is something that the government should be doing. While we can provide some assistance with housing, keeping people in their homes, helping with some of the rehabilitation, elderly people especially, if somebody is suffering and they need a roof or they're going to be homeless because they're going, their house is uninhabitable. We have programs like that helps. It's a hand up, that we can help people. But creating housing, it's too big of a scope of a scale especially for a city. And I think every dollar we've spent in that has been a wasted dollar. If we had taken all that money and all that time and all that energy and focused on transportation, we'd be riding the streetcar today. We would have transportation from the airport to downtown. We would have other transportation kicked off and started if we spent that time focused on that. I understand why, because there was a lot of political, this is what happens is these issues get blown up and people, we've got to do this now. Well, again, the government doesn't move fast enough. It doesn't pivot with the market. We live in a market-driven economy. We need to let the people that are good at that do what they do. And then we need to do what we do well, and that is providing all that infrastructure. That's something that the government can do that private industry can't.
I completely agree with you, and it seems, and especially local government, because you've said government, and I think the different layers of government should have different responsibilities. The federal government, national defense, you could talk about some certain social issues, right? But social issues in a lot of ways don't necessarily have to be injected into local government. I'm generalizing, but you understand what I'm saying. State level,
we actually,
thing.
I introduced a motion, we supported a motion on council that the city council stays out of all of those social issues. That if it doesn't directly impact and we don't have control over that issue, that we don't get involved any longer in, at the council level. Now, personally, our personal politics, because I have personal politics like everybody else does. And if you watch my social media feed, you'll see it all over there. But when I put on my council hat, I represent the city of Tampa.
I love that.
And if I don't have control over the city of Tampa, we don't inject it into the council agenda.
Local government is for foundational things in the fabric of our society to allow people to live a great life, be safe, have nice roads, clean water, and the rest really is up to the economy.
Yeah, and I missed on my laundry list of things, and I'm a great supporter of it, is our law enforcement and our firefighter. That's our first responders.
Absolutely.
That is, again, a responsibility of local government to provide so that when you walk out of your house, you're going to be safe. When your kids walk out of the house, they're going to be safe. That if there was an incident, if you had a health issue, that the paramedics are going to respond, or if your house gets on fire, there's going to be somebody there to put it out.
It's all connected too, right? Like you mentioned, had we done some of these transportation deals a couple decades ago, and we did have a line from the airport to downtown and a circular loop through our urban core, well, guess what? That actually helps with housing affordability.
100%.
Now I can live in an apartment in the urban core
Correct.
in many different neighborhoods and not have the expense of owning a car.
Absolutely. And one of the other things is when we spend, and one of my litmus tests for spending taxpayer money, because I understand that we're taking money from people and we're spending on other things. It's not voluntary. We take your money. I have a litmus test of what I am comfortable spending that money on. It has to either be an investment in the city and the infrastructure. It has to fulfill all those things we spoke about. It has to fit into one of those buckets, or it's got to have a return on the investment. I'll leap over to something else. The West River Walk project.
Good example.
There's some people that are naysayers about that. But one, I think if I had been involved in the beginning of this, I think we have a nomenclature issue. a marketing issue, I would not have called it the West River Walk project, because it's so much bigger than just the section that goes along the river. It's a mobility project. It's a way of people to be able to move through a whole different area of the city of Tampa, because it's wide sidewalks. It's trees. We're going to plant hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trees along this area. It's bicycles, and I'm sure there's going to be people that says, why do we need to have all these bicycle paths? I look at them and go, we're not building them for you. We're building this next generation. They're going to be on electric bikes. Some 70-year-old will come up to me and says, I don't like all these bicycles, you're taking my lanes of traffic and putting. I said, we're not building them for you. We're building them for these teenagers and these 20-year-olds that are coming up. Somebody had to build the first gas stations. You build that infrastructure when it's not there yet, but eventually we're going to come to a more mobile.
This episode is brought to you by the official remodeler of the TBD podcast, Kohler House Remodeling Company. Built on the belief that every homeowner deserves a premium experience, Kohler House is redefining high-end home remodeling with their commitment to integrity, craftsmanship, and quality communication. Their work speaks for itself, from condos in the towers of Channelside to 100-year-old homes in South Tampa, creating spaces that are both stunning and functional. What sets Kohler House Remodeling Company apart is their dedication to not only transforming homes into beautiful spaces, but to elevating the standard of residential general contracting. From concept to completion, every detail is handled with care, ensuring a process that's as smooth as the results are impressive. To learn more, check out our partner's website at kohlerhouse.net, KOHLERHAUS.net. This episode is sponsored by Chansey Architecture and Interior Design. Rooted in the heart of Ybor City for over 35 years, Walt Chansey and his team are trailblazers in their field. Beyond their work across the United States and the Bahamas, Chansey has shaped some of the most iconic residential and commercial spaces that serve as gateways to Cigar City, including Casa Marti and Casa Gomez. What sets Chansey Design apart is their ability to preserve the soul and character of historic buildings while seamlessly integrating modern design and functionality. They blend tradition with innovation, creating spaces that honor the past while meeting today's needs. Check out their work at www.chanseydesign.com.
We're going to have all these alternate forms of transportation, and we're building the infrastructure for those generations that are going to be using those types of transportations. And this West River Walk project is a part of that process. It's linking all these neighborhoods together with wide sidewalks, with bike paths that are shaded by trees. It's going to provide a great infrastructure in these neighborhoods. And guess what? It's going to promote a lot of development along that area, and it is going to return taxes back to the coffers of the city of Tampa 10 or more fold. Just like we see the visionaries of the city before the aquarium. I remember when Sandy Freeman put that aquarium down there. I mean, that was adult bookstores and warehouses, derelict buildings.
Oh yeah.
That's about it. It was a horrible area. So she ended up putting this very, very significant structure, architecturally beautiful building down there, and some people thought she was crazy. Well, you look at it now, billions of dollars, and guess what? She planted one seed, and a forest grew, and that's what we see. The Straz, we see that with the Museum of Art. We'll see that with all this other infrastructure that we have. Look what Armature has done. Armature Works. That's not a city infrastructure, but look what it's done for Tampa Heights. These are the kind of things that we support and we grow. What Daryl Shaw is doing, we support these things and it grows. It's great for the city of Tampa.
There's got to be a line though, right? Because I think the frustration with people with particularly the West River Walk is, you see the price tag on that $50-something million, which could be more if the money's borrowed, right, down the road. Again, you can look at it as an investment, and it certainly is. However, people are frustrated, including myself, when the freaking curbs are all broken up. We need many, many more roads repaved. Some of these brick streets have not been redone in decades and decades and decades. Sidewalks inadequately placed in certain neighborhoods, sidewalks that end to nowhere. In my neighborhood, south of Gandy, every Saturday we go to a coffee shop. Shout out SOG Cafe, fantastic cappuccino, my favorite in the city. And, I take my wife and my baby in a stroller and we attempt to walk there. So the demand for my generation and other generations is, hey, we want to walk, we want to go to a corner store. but the sidewalks are all broken. There's no separation between the traffic on McDill. It is a little scary as a father to go walk with your family on that road. And then you see a 50-something million dollar Riverwalk get built, and you're like, are we a little too ambitious, right? We've had a bull run in this city. We've had an incredible amount of economic action. There's a lot of exciting things. The Lightning, we got Tom Brady, right? There's all this good. There's all this bull run. At some point, don't we need to tie our shoes? You know what I mean?
You know, the one thing I know about the city is you have to be able to do multiple things at once. I will say that one of the things I ran on to be on city council was pave our damn roads.
Yeah.
In my first year, we tripled the road budget. Tripled. The next year, we added millions of dollars more. So we are paving roads at a record pace just in the last 2 years. Since I've been on council and with the support of the administration and my fellow council folks, we are paving roads all over the city of Tampa, and I think everybody can see that. We put pressure on the county commission. Our county commission is starting to pave some of their damn roads.
Yeah.
That's been really frustrating as the county has neglected the city roads, the roads that are within the city of Tampa. Some
There's
of the
many.
the state roads and the sidewalks. We are now paving more sidewalks in the city of Tampa than we ever have before. We are creating crews, City of Tampa employee crews within the city of Tampa that we're able to pave and do sidewalks on pennies on the dollar than what we were doing with contracts before.
Yeah.
These programs are just a year old now, and you're going to start seeing those things.
No, I see it a lot.
And it is a priority in the
And I
city.
do want to say that.
But you can't do just one thing. You have to do lots of things. And we can't, especially for economic development, things that have a return on the investment, we can't neglect those because otherwise we become a stagnant city. And you have to keep reinventing yourself, and you have to keep improving so that the city rises to different challenges and becomes a place that people want to live.
Yeah, 100%. And I have seen that a lot. In fact, right out in front of here, right in front of this building, I've seen this more in the last 12 months than I have in my entire life. The city has gone around and actually carved where necessary and ground down sidewalks to make them more accessible and more even. I mean, that has been done in my neighborhood in South Tampa. That's been done here downtown. I see it up in the Heights. Like, it's literally happening everywhere.
As you speak, and it's going to be happening more. Again, just in the last 2 years, since I've been on council and with the support of everybody else that I work around, we're putting more and more money. So it's not that we are getting more attention to paving and sidewalks than ever in modern history, at least. Yeah, so we are doing this and we're doing that. So that's the one thing about being a city. We can't neglect one area. We've got to be able to keep all the balls in the air. We have to be able to continue to provide you clean water. We have to be able to continue to keep your streets safe with our good police. And we have to be able to pave the roads and give sidewalks and make these sidewalks safe where kids can go to school.
You're saying it's not a this or that.
It's not a this or that. We have to be able, in fact, that's what I would say to anybody. We have to be able to do it all. And you know what? We have to be able to do it all in a quick, expeditious, and cost-effective way.
Yeah.
And that is the most important thing for government.
Absolutely. I just feel like maybe it could be expedited more.
Oh, you and me both. I mean, if I lose sleep over one thing, it's my frustration with the speed of things. I think that's part of, if I could point to one thing that the city needs to do better is move quicker on like permitting. I think
that's a big one.
It's a big issue. And I think one of the things, how can we help folks, especially our business community that is building affordable housing, that are building, these infrastructure projects. We need to be able to, what the city should do is do everything they could possibly do to make it as cost effective and least burdensome on the folks that are building out Tampa. Whatever we can do to make their life quicker and easier, not that we're going to let them, cut corners, but we need to be able to move these things a lot quicker. And one of the biggest complaints I get is the permitting department and how slow it is to get a permit in the city of Tampa. And that needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed quickly.
It needs to be fixed quickly for multiple reasons. The biggest one is just the consistency and clarity that not only a developer has, but someone who just is looking to buy in a particular neighborhood. Right. What can be built around me? What can be built across the street? But then from a developer and investor standpoint, if I want to do a project, am I going to miss the market? Is it going to take me 12 or 18 months to get this thing kicked off?
Right. Well, this is one thing I'll say, and this is for folks that are listening, that the developers that are listening, I think they already know this from me, the types of projects that I support. If it is transit-oriented development, and this is what I'll say to the neighbors as well, I'm a huge neighborhood advocate. I do not believe that we need to encroach on our traditional neighborhoods and dramatically change our traditional neighborhoods. If you're buried deep into a neighborhood, I don't think that you should suffer because of Tampa's growth. However, if you live within a city block of one of our designated transit corridors, you can expect to be impacted by the growth of the city of Tampa. I fully support that we need to go to the FAA heights in all through Channelside, all along Kennedy Boulevard. I think we need to have step-down density. We need to have greater density along Kennedy Boulevard. We need to have greater density along all of our transportation corridors, the Florida, Nebraska, and then we need to have step-down density. That is going to encroach on the boundaries of some of these neighborhoods. So if you live within those areas, you're going to have. But if you're a developer that's coming and you want to do like lot splits and put too much on too little, especially in South Tampa.
Sure.
I say all the time, South Tampa's full. Our schools are full. Our roads are full. You need to conform with the development pattern in our traditional existing neighborhoods in these areas. That I'm not game to try to put the 10 pounds of flour in a 1 pound bag. It doesn't work anymore. We have flooding issues, we have runoff issues, we have traffic issues, and people that live and have built the city of Tampa don't deserve to have that kind of encroachment on their neighborhood.
There's so much here because you mentioned, planting over 100 trees. Well, if you look at old photos of Tampa, just type in, let me even see if I have a photo. Where's my phone? Over there. Type in, just type in, gosh, what could you do? You could go to the Tampa history page on Facebook. They've put up multiple photos of old South Tampa. And you can see South Tampa was a scrub peninsula, right?
Palmettos,
mm-hmm. Pine trees, a lot of sand.
No oak trees.
Right. And I love oak trees. Yeah. They're incredibly beautiful. Yeah. They're amazing. But for people to pretend this is the natural landscape of South Tampa,
it's not.
It's not true at all. Developers are the ones.
It was rattlesnakes, pine trees, and palmettos. Yeah.
Developers put the oak trees in.
Yep.
The tree canopy we enjoy today might not last throughout my entire lifetime. And I think we should really think about species of tree. We should think about where the trees go, because I'm telling you, this natural peninsula was never meant to have this much pollen, this much leaves, this much debris. I'm serious. These hurricanes come through, the amount of debris.
How timely going into pollen season for somebody. You're talking with somebody who suffers from allergies.
I have it worse than anyone. I'm going to be stopped up for the next 3 months, and it sucks.
Yeah.
David's looking at me like, what do I look up? Type in, go to Facebook, go to the Tampa history page. By the way, if you're a Tampa history nerd, this page is freaking awesome. They have like 70,000 members. They're always putting cool stuff up just so people can see what we're talking about, because the trees are not natural to this environment.
The irony is a lot of those oak trees that were planted back then have reached the end of their life cycle. So
this is my point. Exactly.
So they're all dying. So that's what we're seeing in a lot of these neighborhoods.
So scroll through, David. Just let me see what we've got. Because I think this is actually an issue that not a lot of people are talking about, at least that I'm aware of right now, is what happens in the next 30 years. And also, too, some of these trees that were planted by developers, and let's just say the 40s, 50s, which is where a lot of South Tampa developed, well, council has denied projects based on tree preservation, but not considered the fact that some of those trees are going to die in the next 40, 50 years. But then we've stifled our housing supply in lieu of a squirrel's house, right?
It's interesting, Garrett. When I first got on council, I'll be honest with you, I was one of those ones who would watch it like a tree hearing and throw things at the TV, because I wasn't necessarily the biggest tree supporter, but I've turned into a tree lover on council. Part of it is because of the public out, but I also understand that, again, everything's a balance. You have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I will say that we have a natural resource folks, when we hear these land use hearings, that they evaluate trees. And so they will give a score on a tree of what its life expectancy is, what the health of it is, and so we do. And some of those trees that are, not in great health, or that are not specimens maybe worthy of saving, we allow those trees to be replaced or even replanted.
Pull that one up.
Yeah, that's more like what the city would look like.
So this is Memorial Highway, which I believe is Kennedy. What Memorial Highway? Kennedy used to be called Grand Central. Go back out of this. Let's see what intersection this is. McDill might have been Memorial.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think Memorial was McDill.
Yeah, there's the dry cleaner at Kennedy.
No, Kennedy was Memorial. Yeah. So this is Kennedy and McDill. Okay, so click that photo. Now, there's really not an oak tree in sight, if I'm not mistaken. This is all pine land. Look how far you can see. Right. Again, I'm not anti-tree. I'm just saying, let's really be methodical moving forward, because these oak trees are busting up the sidewalks, clogging the storm drains.
Well, okay, as a politician in Tampa, you're not going to hear me saying bad things about trees. But I don't
get passionate.
I do not have a death wish. I will. There are trees that are worthy. There's a lot of trees that are worthy of saving, and I think that thoughtful development, and we see a lot of that in the city of Tampa. They do save trees. And they're able to, and we have a process where they can replant trees and the types of trees that they replant and where they plant them. That it's a well thought out process. And I think that we do a good job of that. We don't, if there is a tree that would prevent development on a buildable lot, that we don't save that tree. We don't, a developer can come in and justify. They just have to show why that tree would so adversely impact that development that it has to come out, and we don't stop that from happening. But what they do is if they take out a certain type of tree, they have to plant so many trees to replace that tree. The nice thing about that is it ensures a tree canopy for future generations. So I think we strike a great balance in the city of Tampa of our tree preservation and our program. And while you're right, that is the natural environment. What we have created, though, in South Tampa, because guess what? There wasn't a lot of people living there back then either. So it was, if you wanted to live with a bunch of rattlesnakes, this would have been a great habitat to be in. This was more rattlesnakes than probably people at the time. So it's not, honestly, when you walk on a sidewalk, it's nice having that tree cover.
It is. I think it's an asset to the city. I really do. I don't want people to take it the wrong way.
It also increases home value. A tree canopy increases your home value.
I think it's an asset to a creative type of development that incorporates these beautiful canopies. But to pretend that I don't like to hear essentially what is misinformation sometimes when people talk about the tree canopy, acting like it's been here for 200 years.
If you heard a land use hearing 2 weeks ago, you would have heard me say something from the dais, and that is, you just can't say no to everything. And that is right. And I believe that this is a balance that the neighborhoods and the activists that come before council have to really embrace, is that you can't say no to everything. There has to be that you have to be able to weigh things out and say, this is a reasonable approach to development of this property, or this is an unreasonable approach. It just can't be no.
Reason. That's a word that's been lost, I think, in the last probably decade or so in local politics all the way up to the federal level. Unfortunately, we've lost reason a bit. But yeah, I mean, I think the right way to do it is reason. Maybe it makes sense in certain areas to remove some of these trees, and maybe it doesn't in other areas. But what it definitely does not make sense to do is shove in the thousands of single-use units they did south of Gandy, all those apartment homes on the West Shore corridor.
Well, it's interesting because when I made that statement, it was about a redevelopment project in South, but it was single-family attached homes, and that I voted in favor of because I thought it was a reasonable use of the property. It was single family. It wasn't overly dense like some of those. There was an activist in town that called them plywood palaces. I think some of those are. It's too much on too little. The infrastructure hasn't kept up with the development, and I don't necessarily know that that type of housing on a peninsula is the right way to develop this area of the city of Tampa.
Well, what it did was it took away from the good development we're kind of talking about, right? I mean,
it's a very suburban development and it should be more of an urban type of an area.
Completely agree.
Right.
That belongs up in Wesley Chapel.
There David. You go. Pasco County or
Riverview, Brandon, et cetera, right? But that's the problem. You're shoving in hundreds and hundreds of apartment units that are single use. Anytime someone wants to get a stick of butter, they need to get in their car and leave.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable for anyone. No. And unfortunately, when you do that, now that whole neighborhood feels like they can't take anymore, which is probably fair. Right. Very fair. I feel that way. Living in South Tampa, it's like, Jesus Christ, how many people can they shove into this peninsula?
Well, I ran on a platform of pave our damn roads, and South Tampa's full.
Yeah.
And even though I'm in a citywide seat, I do live in South Tampa, and I recognize, again, our schools are all overcrowded. Our roads are overcrowded. My goodness, go by the church the school off of McDill on any given day. It's crazy.
The Academy of the Holy Names.
Academy, yeah. I didn't want to use the name because I didn't want to.
Well,
I didn't want to get the hate mail.
Well, but it's I said it for you. Don't worry. I'll take your hate mail. I think that a lot of this comes down to looking at each individual scenario case project and trying to formulate the best decision you can, but also remembering these things don't happen overnight, meaning what you've said about these transit ready corridors and incentivizing and promoting development, let's say along Dale Mabry, Kennedy, McDill, et cetera, right? These larger commercial corridors. It's not like it's going to happen overnight. This is not going to happen at the flick of a wrist. It's going to happen over decades. And I think people get amped up and excited and very passionate about change.
Me too.
And me too. But sometimes we all need to sit back and go, this isn't going to happen overnight. This is a long range plan to effectively build out this city that I might end up seeing at the end of my lifetime.
And I'll be dead and gone. But
frankly, a lot of the people that are passionate will be too.
But I recognize that. But I have kids and I have a granddaughter that lives here, and I'm excited about that's what's so interesting about serving in government at this moment. I think more so than ever before, we have an opportunity to really make some consequential decisions about what this city, are we going to turn into Orlando or Miami, or are we going to be a model city? We have an opportunity to do things that those two cities did not.
Yeah.
Because we know the growth is coming. We know that the opportunity is there, and we can be smarter about it. And that's my quest of serving on Tampa City Council, is that at least in what I contribute is that we are smarter in these decisions, that we make good decisions, that this city is a better city because I served here, and then we build this out for my kids, my grandchild, and your kids and your future grandchildren, of what the city is going to look like. The city is really on that pivotal moment in time, and we talk about the transit-oriented development. I've been working with the mayor. I've been working with our head of our mobility. I think the next thing we need to do, because we talk about that airport to downtown transportation option, we have to sit down, and I've been pushing them to do this, is we have to put down a team to say, okay, we have to pick the corridor. What corridor is that? And I do not support going down 275.
Pull that map up, David.
I think that 275 is a major mistake, because while it's the easiest points of connection to get from point A to point B, it doesn't provide anything for the residents of the city of Tampa and the folks. It doesn't provide transportation for people that are living here when it goes down the right-of-way corridor.
Other way, David, towards the airport.
We need to pick a corridor, whether it's Kennedy, whether it's Cypress, whether it's Columbus. We need to pick a route, and then right now we're in the process of doing our future land use. We're rewriting it all, right?
Yeah.
So when we pick that corridor, we need to change our land use so the developers have predictability as well. So they know that this is going to be a transit corridor, that we're going to provide some form of transportation. What that looks like, I don't know yet. But at some point in the future, there's going to be a way to get from the airport to downtown. It's going to go through this area, and we're going to build transit-oriented development, create land use, dense land use along that corridor that supports that type of transportation.
Well, so the airport did a pretty large expansion to the rental car area. Part of that
Correct.
expansion was that little tram,
Yep.
right? And then in a separate tab, just pull up Tampa International Airport new tram. And is it a German company that's created these?
I believe so.
Overseas they've created these beautiful new, kind of like little trolley deals.
Autonomous vehicles.
Autonomous vehicle. Now, to me, you would just extend that path. Your next stop after the terminal is the rental car. You stay on, and then it takes you downtown.
And that's what the nice thing is. We have a new airport director, Stevens, is coming on board. He is very much. When you talk about vision, I've known him for many, many, many years. He shares my vision about what transportation looks like, and he's very excited about bringing transportation off the airport and connecting to whatever system that we create. There is a challenge that we need some legislative relief from Tallahassee, because the airport can only fund up to the airport boundary. So to get from, those of you who have watched what's happened along Cypress, you saw the old DoubleTree come down. So FDOT owns that piece of property. They also own the Charlie Steakhouse property. That still exists because they're getting until they move it. That was supposed to be a mixed modal transportation center that we could connect from the airport to there and then connect something else. I think the original idea was to go down Cypress. Somebody in their infinite wisdom decided to put a big, when they built the bridge of 275 over Cypress, decided to put support structures on Cypress, blocking access to go through there for us. So that would end up being a costly fix to rebuild that bridge. But I think there's many things that we can explore. I don't think we're necessarily tied to one thing, because we've got this West Shore, where West Shore Mall is now being redeveloped. I think there's opportunity there. Like, let's say we wanted to go down further south. We could connect off of there to go down Kennedy Boulevard with the transportation system. We could connect off down Boy Scout, go through Columbus, and then loop back in. So there's all kinds of opportunity, but we need to sit down and really weigh out of those with subject matter experts, with engineers, figure out what the best use, and then also land use people to determine what that return on the investment is.
So within government, who has a seat at the table trying to figure out where this connection would go from the airport to downtown? City of Tampa, Hillsborough County.
I think the City of Tampa and FDOT would be the big players in this. I think Hillsborough County would have a seat at the table as well, but I think that FDOT and the City of Tampa probably need to be the ones that are like pulling these groups together. And I think one, because we have the land use issues and this is totally completely contained within the City of Tampa, we should take a leadership position on this.
I think we should take a leadership position on almost anything concerning with our entire region. Our city is the reason why the region exists the way it does. A lot's happened in between, but the City of Tampa is the major economic engine for business. We have the airport, right?
The port,
all the above.
Yep.
And so and you brought up a great point about, hey, we shouldn't go down 275. That's all U.S. Department of Transportation. Right. That's how that works. So that the federal government owns that,
and FDOT.
And
the U.S. government provides funding, but FDOT is one that actually builds all those things out and manages it. So funding flows for the U.S. government to the FDOT.
I like doing anything where it keeps control within the city. I think the city knows best what it needs, what it wants.
We're having conversations now with about that. I've had conversations with the mayor, and I know I've had conversations with Hart about the role of the City of Tampa has with transportation within the City of Tampa.
I think it includes our roads. I think it's total BS. You know, some people say, oh, we can't do that on that road. Well, you can't touch West Shore. That's a state road. Dale Mabry's a state road. Hillsborough County owns Bay Shore. What is Tampa left with?
Well, West Shore is tough too because it's got a high pressure gas line, the fuel line going on from the Port Tampa all the way to the airport. So the challenges of West Shore is a lot more complicated than just building a road.
Well, but also you've got such a skinny road going through
and again, that's the reason why it's skinny, because you can't expand it because they got that high pressure aircraft fuel line going through there.
So maybe we forget it as a high traffic corridor,
Correct.
Put in wider sidewalks and try to get a lot of that traffic on Manhattan, on Dale Mabry,
just like we should be doing on Beta Bay. That should be more of a boulevard and less of a speedway.
Do we own Beta Bay?
Beta Bay I believe it is a city road. Yes, I think it is.
But I don't believe McDill is.
McDill is not.
I don't think Bayshore Boulevard.
Bayshore Boulevard, we have a maintenance agreement with the county, but it's a county road. Florida is.
So we pay for it as a city, but the county owns it.
No, it's a cooperative agreement. We do some maintenance agreements on it, but the county pays for it.
The county pays for it,
but we maintain the park. We maintain all the amenities on it.
Okay, that's another thing too, and it just goes back to what you're saying about the ownership. I would like for the city to make more of an ownership position so we can control our destiny, and also related to the streetcar.
The county wants that desperately, but the county wants it they want it without any strings attached. And right now, the way the tax.
What do you mean by that though?
Because all these streets that the county owns, the county has the taxing authority. And how they share money with the city to maintain that we get percentage of the taxes that come out. The county gets the taxes to maintain those roads, but for years and years and years they haven't been. Well, what the county wants to do is give us the roads, but they don't want to give us the money to maintain them that they're collecting. So they want to take that money and use it in areas that they don't maintain. So the city is willing to take the roads over, but we need the share of the taxes that come to the county coffers to maintain those roads in perpetuity. So
why wouldn't they do it? Because they're worried about Waimama and all these other high growth areas?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Why do I get the sense that we're getting the short end of the stick?
We are.
Yeah.
100% we are. Now, I will say in the last year and a half or so, the county has been stepping up, and you see some of that. You see Howard Avenue. You see a lot of these projects for these roads that are being improved. The county is stepping up a little bit.
Yeah.
Not as much as they need to, but they are stepping up.
I think we need to figure out what leverage we have and use it against them. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't want to go too deep into whatever you're thinking on this podcast, but I just think that the city needs to control its own destiny. How many years have we talked about these things? But when you add in these layers of government at the county, state, and federal level, they get so damn complicated. And then you find out, we don't own...
Everything is more complicated than it seems on the surface. Once you start peeling back the onion on most everything, you realize that everything is more complicated.
Well, something I'm really concerned about is this whole new multi-county jurisdictional planning organization.
I serve on the TPO.
Okay,
so I have a seat on that board. I've been one of the naysayers because I echo what you just described. The city of Tampa is the economic driver for the region. Right now, the transportation planning organization is based on counties, and Hillsborough County we have our TPO, and that's the board that I sit on. We were challenged by the state to create a plan to merge Pinellas, Pasco, and Hillsborough into one organization. Not mandated to do it, but just create a plan. There's been a lot of political pressure from folks to try to get this done. For the most part, everybody that just represents the city of Tampa, including the county commissioners that only represent districts within the city, we voted against it because we understand right now it's already very frustrating on the TPO because the city of Tampa has a minority vote on the board. We have some non-elected folks that are sitting on the board, and then the county commission. So the city of Tampa can't sway. We already have a glimpse into the future of what a combined TPO would look like because we live it right now in Hillsborough County. We don't want to give up any kind of additional leverage because we would have that significant smaller of a say on the regional TPO. The advantage the city of Tampa has is because of federal rules, not state, that the TPO, the largest metropolitan city within the proposed combined area, has to concur with the agreement to merge. So the city of Tampa has the ability to say no to this process. None of us have actually said no. We've all voted I think one voted to not pursue this, but I voted in favor of continuing because I don't mind having more and more information. So I voted to continue the exploration of combination of the city because I wanted to see where does it land. I want to have all the information before we ultimately make a decision. But if the vote was held today, I would say no, because I have a glimpse of what the future holds because I can already see that we are vetoed. An example, the expansion of 275 from Hillsborough to Bears. There was some shenanigans that happened on the TPO. That proposal had fallen off of the priority list. In one meeting, without it being noticed, during the meeting, one of the persons that serve on the TPO introduced a measure to put it back on the priority list of expanding from Hillsborough to Bears, one lane of traffic each way. Sounds like a good idea. Who's against adding a lane of traffic? We've all sat on there and we thought, oh, this is a great idea. Well, the problem is the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people and the cost for the return on the investment. By the time the cost of the project and everything is done, this is going to be a $500 million project. $500 million to add one lane of traffic just from Hillsborough to Bears. You give the city of Tampa $500 million, and guess what? All these transportation things we're talking about, we could get them all done. It would be the catalyst to get all of these things accomplished. That would take all these cars off the road, that would move people around, that would be the start of a car-free environment for everybody that lives within the urban core here. But we're going to spend $500 million with the capital and the interest to put one lane of traffic that'll do nothing but induce demand. One lane of traffic between Hillsborough and Bears. Induce demand, by the way, I don't know if anybody saw the editorial. Hoyt Prendle wrote an editorial in the Tampa Bay Times about induced demand and about this project, and I think it was really well written.
He's going to come on the show and explain the whole thing in detail, which I can't wait. So were they successful in that?
They were. So we are going to spend $500 million to add one lane of traffic.
And to your point, the city of Tampa is not really the decision maker.
Correct.
There.
We got
especially the people of the city.
We were completely disrespected because we all voted against it, and the folks that do not represent the city overrode our decision.
What leverage do we have to pull away from that organization, from the county, whatever we have to do to try to control our own destiny? Is there anything the city can do? I know our hands are tied.
Not that organization, because that organization is a bigger picture organization than the TPO. But there are some things I think we've talked about because there was some, Hart and I got into a little bit of a tussle over this over the fare-free streetcar. There was they had some budget issues, and there was they went out publicly and started talking about adding fares to the streetcar. Well, we're not going to have fares on the streetcar. I can tell you right now, the mayor and I are simpatico on this issue. We're not going to have fares on the streetcar. It is going to be fare free. And we've said, if you don't want to run the streetcar, we will. The city can take over the streetcar. Well, Hart doesn't want that because, guess what's driving their numbers, which gives their reimbursable, the streetcar. then they get reimbursed.
How do we get it back from them?
Well, I mean, I think that if there's a will, we can take it back. I mean, it's infrastructure that we could take back. There's some things that we can do to make that happen. Whether we do that or not, is yet to be determined. But we could.
Is the just so I understand, is the agreement that we own it, meaning the city of Tampa owns it,
and they operate it,
and they pay for it and operate it, or does the city have to pay for it too?
We have a little bit of we contribute some to it. But our taxes contribute to it. We have a part of the streetcar funding is that there is a district that is created that services a streetcar, and commercial buildings within that district have a tax that helps fund the streetcar operation. Actually, this is interesting because we talk about the expansion of the streetcar. One of the things that has to happen is we're going to have a district that is created that encompasses the existing streetcar and this proposed extension. We're going to expand that tax district to including the residential properties, and that is what's going to fund the operation of the streetcar and keep it fare free. So we're going to have a streetcar taxation district property values are going to skyrocket when we have a car-free environment. It's going to be a great,
oh my gosh,
it's going to be a great opportunity. We've had great neighborhood support to create that, but that's one of the things the city has to do. We got to get off our butt and get that done too.
Well, you're talking about a sort of CRA, correct?
No, it's not a CRA.
It's a different thing.
It's a tax district. There's the legislature allows us to create these special tax districts based on services. And we already have one for the streetcar, but it's only commercial and it's only for the area that it currently serves. What has to happen is the city has to do a study. They have to determine what that area looks like, how far away from the streetcar it would reasonably be considered an area that is serviced by the streetcar. So they define that geographic area. Then it needs to go to the voters to vote on, and they vote to create that district. And then there'll be just a small amount of tax that each property that is in that area that would pay.
I mean, that makes sense to me.
Similar, like Hyde Park pays a little tax for their lighting. They have those.
Shouldn't that be set up across the entire city and every neighborhood, right? Like South Tampa deals with flooding. Shouldn't there be a little special tax district to beef up their flooding infrastructure?
Well, we have a tax. We have a
stormwater tax, which I think was implemented during this administration. Right?
Stormwater was done in the previous administration. This administration did pipes. So we have a $3 billion program to replace it, which we are the envy of most cities in the United States because we are replacing all of our water pipes. 100-year-old water pipes. This is something the mayor doesn't get enough credit for. Because, it's not glamorous. Nobody sees it. It's all underground. It's not fancy. Nobody looks at, oh, this is so cool. No, but you know what? It matters if there's a cave in or you turn on your water and there's rusty water coming out.
Mayor Castor put it a really kind of cheeky, funny way, but very matter of fact, like she always does. And she came out, and I think, there's always an expectation from an elected official to really sell the plan to the public. And she just kind of came out and was like, this is just one of those things we have to do. It's just, we have to do it. And she's so right. It's not sexy. Hell, you can't even see it.
Correct.
It's below the ground.
Yeah.
But we have to get it done.
It's got to get and there's a good project. So that's $3 billion over 20 years. $3 billion. That's what it's going to cost.
Probably the largest infrastructure project in Tampa's history.
It's massive, and it's the envy of every city needs to do this, but nobody has the political will.
Especially in Florida.
And nobody has the political will to do it. A lot of places, people have lead in pipes.
Right.
We have clay. There's clay
I was just going to say ceramic piping.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So these are the kind of things, again, we can't just do one thing. We have to do multiple things.
Yeah.
So, when you're, especially, I think in local government is probably one of the more challenging levels of government, as far as what we have to focus on. That's one of the learning curves of being new on council. I was an air traffic controller for 30 plus years. I went to school to be a geologist. Well, first I started off as a jungle cruise skipper at Disney World. Then I went to school to be a geologist. Then I became an air traffic controller, and now I'm a politician. So I got into this, and I was kind of like in politics my whole life, and I kind of knew some of these things. But all of a sudden, overnight, you have to be an expert on land use. You have to, so you're almost like a land use attorney. You have to be an expert on wastewater, on fresh water, on trash, on recycling.
How much help do you guys have getting this information? Because how could you keep track of it all?
It was my first year. I did more reading than I did since college.
Wow.
I was spending, I can't even tell you how many hours a week of just reading, just volumes and volumes of documents and learning and watching videos, getting briefings by subject matter experts. And every day, while we only spend X amount of hours on council, every day I'm busy doing something. I've got meetings, I've got briefings, I've meet with more lawyers than I ever thought that I would meet with in my entire life. My days are usually filled with talking with lawyers, giving briefings on things, because now you're an expert on workman's comp and lawsuits, and there's all these things that you have to deal with. And so we're having to deal with this plethora of very diverse items, and try to become, and you're making consequential decisions. We have a $2 billion budget, so you're managing, and city council is 100%. 7 of us are responsible for $2 billion every year. So you're 100% responsible for a $2 billion budget. You're making life and death decisions on things. You're making consequential decisions on the infrastructure of a major American city. I mean, it's crazy. It's just absolutely
crazy. It's crazy, but it's cool. And you're really enthusiastic about some of these ideas. And I love that about you, because you're very forward thinking. You're really, it sounds like your decision making is based on future generations and decades to come versus, well, this person's concerned about, more traffic in her neighborhood for the next 20 years of her life.
Well, I'm in a really lucky position, because I've had a really good, productive life. I've had a very interesting life, and I've had many different chapters. And so, I'm not running. This is not a job for me. I don't depend on being an elected official to put a roof over my head or feed my family. So, and I do this next to run again, or I don't run again, or I run for something else, right? Come see, come saw. But I'm in a position that a lot of people aren't. I make decisions based on the information that I have, and doing what I believe based on all of the information that I gather is the right decision for that moment and for the future of the city of Tampa.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what I come to every decision point, and we have a lot of decision points throughout every day that I serve, is when I look at this is the information, the evidence that I've been provided, and what is the right thing to do on that particular issue. Then I make that decision, and we move on to the next issue.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating place to be in life. It's a luxury. It's a luxury that I have that maybe some others don't, because and sometimes I can make people happy, and sometimes I don't make people happy.
Sure.
But I don't make these decisions based on relationships or based on this or that. It's really trying to do the right thing at the right moment at the right time.
Can you talk about the Harbor Island? I know you probably can't go into detail, but the ruling on Harbor Island with Liberty Group regarding the council's quasi-judicial power. You probably can't go into specifics. I think that's an ongoing lawsuit with the city of Tampa, but
we have it in an appeal. So there was a decision. Judge Moe made a ruling that the city of Tampa council does not have the authority to do land use. That would upend case law and Supreme Court decisions in the state of Florida, and really completely change. And it's interesting, because I'm talking in broad terms. What that would end up doing is creating a land use process that would take the citizen's voice out of the process, because you would create something that would be staff driven, and the citizens would not have a voice to have a say in the development of the cities that they live in. And that would be a grave mistake, not just for the city of Tampa, but Florida as a whole.
Well, does the public have a say in what some other person decides to do with their property? Isn't this a property rights issue? Now, of course, there's a balance, right?
It's a balance. And you're absolutely right, because I'm a big property rights person. I'm 100%. I will start at a foundation that I believe that people have individual property rights, but we do have property rights based on a shared understanding of because we have zoning. We have a planning commission. We have, future land use maps. So while you have a piece of property, when you purchase that property, you have an understanding of what you can do on that piece of property. Mm-hmm. And that's already a shared understanding you have between you and your neighbors. So you live let's say you live in the middle of a neighborhood, deep into a suburban type of neighborhood. You can't put a porno store in the middle of your neighborhood. You can't put a hotel in the middle of your neighborhood. There's lots of things you cannot do, even though that you own that land, but you have a shared understanding about what that land is we create, because we live in a society that we're all tightly packed. We're not in the wilderness. We don't live in the middle of Timbuktu. So we have all decided as a society that we are going to develop the city of Tampa in this pattern. And that's how we make that decision. What ends up being where the city council gets involved is when we start changing that, or people come and appeal those decisions, or they want to, or the city has evolved. And we see that. like we just talked about these transit-oriented corridors. So you see how some areas maybe were used in one way in days gone by, but that day is pivoted. We talked about channel side, how that was all warehouses. Well, now it's residential. We've changed in a right. We did that in a right way, but you did that through public hearings, through having those discussions, and so that we all shared in that decision-making process. It wasn't dictatorial. Big government or big corporation didn't come in and tell somebody they're going to do this way. We did it in a very judicious and logical way.
Well, what's happened really is Tampa's land development code was, in its more modern form, was really established in the late 80s. Since then, it's been piecemealed by different decisions by different councils over the years, et cetera.
With different priorities and different understanding of what those priorities are.
Also with different cultural ways of life. People live different in the late 1980s than they do today. People today are much more receptive to being urbanites, walkable, bike lanes, etc. Right? That's and just as I described, that's what my family enjoys on a Saturday. We want walkability. We attempt to walk in our neighborhood, even though it might not be the perfect scenario yet. I think we're getting there.
We're getting there.
With the Land Development Code update, I'm on the Citizens Advisory Board. My biggest thing I hope to see out of this, and Clarion's the organization, I think the city's spending over $1 million for this third party to come in and really, and you kind of have to have that, right? You have to have that third party outside of Tampa to come in, look at our code, find what's wrong, and try to make sense of it to move forward and rewrite it.
Well, you have to have that third party too, because remember, our staff already has full-time jobs. So their plate is already full. So then when you add this to it, we don't have extra people just hanging around with nothing to do.
Well, and you don't necessarily want to hire a bunch of people either.
Exactly. So now, so that's what you do. You hire these for this temporary help, and Clarion is the temporary help.
But the piecemealed system we have and some of the conflict between zoning, future land use, there's all these different codes you have to sort through. It's almost created this complex here in Tampa where a project will, a developer will get with an attorney and go, hey, look, I know the zoning is kind of this, but this is really what we're trying to do here. So let's set up the PD. Let's go before council. We'll meet with the neighborhood and we'll try to form some sort of a consensus and move forward, right? But it's created this kind of horrible process where all these decisions are being in front of council. My whole hope with this rewrite is naturally, through clarity and the consistency with the code, is you don't have those meetings anymore because the developer knows exactly what they're getting into. They don't need to hire an attorney to go before council and try to push something through that doesn't really belong.
Well, I think that's an admirable goal, but unfortunately, I don't know if it's going to work in practice, because there's always the exception to the rule. There's always going to be the exception to the rule. And it's funny, you hit on PD, which if somebody's watched this video all the way to this point, they're such a nerd, they already know what PD is, but it's planned development.
That's so true.
But, it's funny because if you've watched anything, I'm not a big fan of PDs in the way they've been applied in the city, because you look at our land use map and it's like PD,
Right.
Especially in traditional neighborhoods. I don't think that, now I can't say there's never a reason, because sometimes there is. Trees. You may need a PD because to save a tree. So you may need to be able to, and it's so much easier to use a PD to shift boundaries.
That's what they're for. Yeah, they're for exceptions.
And generally, I think they're for the larger scale projects, as we see along these transportation corridors, because we're re-envisioning what the city looks like. All of a sudden, there was a time when you wanted parking in the front of your buildings.
Sure.
Big street parking, surface parking in front of buildings, and because we're car transit oriented, development. And there was how we developed the cities looked very different than what we're trying to do today. Now we're trying to push these buildings up to the front with big sidewalks and cafes and streetscapes, and so these are where PDs really work on larger scale developments. I'm not a big fan, again, with just those exceptions. I'm not a big fan of using PDs in neighborhoods, because it removes. Again, you have your house in a neighborhood, you should have some predictability about what's developed around you. When you bought your house, this is what this neighborhood is. There's no bigger societal reason to press into your neighborhood to change that way of life. If you live in Suburb Beautiful, or you live in Forest Hills, or you live in, some other neighborhood, you should have some predictability about the largest investment you'll ever make in your life. And I think PDs take that predictability away.
Sure. Well, one of the things they've done, like with RS50 and RS60, RS50 is a 50-foot wide minimum, RS60 is a 60-foot wide minimum, but there's a ton of lots in Tampa that are zoned RS60, but they're like 55 feet wide, right? So that's a small example of, hey, you make all of those, the same rules, the same zoning law as RS50, and then all of those non-conforming lots overnight become conforming, and you've got less opportunity for someone to come to council for a PD on the lot in a particular neighborhood.
100%.
So that obviously is a small...
Get the rules to conform with existing build-out patterns.
Step one, exactly. Right? Step one.
Yeah, and some of those PDs, like we just had what was a logical, actually, lot split in an area that lot split created lots that more mimicked areas around it already, existing build-out pattern, as you just described, except that one of the lots ended up being like a foot too short. Well, it was kind of like, it was the easiest path there was no reason to deny that development, for a foot, for 12 inches. So that was an easy vote to say yes, even though, again, generally because what's happened is in past, what I've seen time and time again, we've had these lawyers come before us, they abuse the process. They use PDs to get around the rules instead of having it to fix small issues. They use a PD to try to wedge really inappropriate projects at the wrong project in the wrong place.
That's kind of what I was describing in the beginning, where the lawyers know that they can work the system in that manner.
Well, they're not working this council. This council's kind of put their foot down on that.
No, they're not. And the reason is the public has actually done a damn good job of paying attention to all this stuff, rallying together, and coming to you all, the council, with logical arguments, specific arguments that can counteract some of these lawyers. I mean, these people are not professionals. These are just neighborhood advocates that are trying to fight for their community. And for them to get together and go against the lawyers is kind of an impressive thing to watch, to be honest.
Yeah, again, then it goes sometimes too far. Again, you can't say no to everything.
That was my original point, though, about the property rights issue.
Right.
Should a group of individuals be able to come to a council and convince them to deny a project?
No, you should be able to. What we have to do is when we're judges in these land use hearings, is we have to be able to take the evidence that's presented to us and sift it for what is competent and substantial evidence. Because there's a lot of other things that get injected into these discussions that is not competent and substantial evidence. And a lot of times, a lot of emotion, you can't come before council and say, I don't like this. I can't use that. Just because you don't like something is not a legal reason for me to vote against something. You have to come to say that this is the reason, these are the reasons why. It doesn't conform with future land use. It doesn't conform with, all of our rules and regulations. And, there's a lot of reasons why certain projects should or should not be approved. And we have to weigh those out on everything. The one, it's when you look at the development of the city of Tampa, during the previous administration, we were at a time of building and construction. It was come to Tampa and build, baby, build, right?
Right.
That's where the city of Tampa was at that time. This council, and I think where we are now and for the future, it has not come to Tampa and build anything anywhere. We still want business. We still want construction. We still want projects, but we want the right project at the right place. It has to be transit-oriented development. It has to be the right density. We want more density in the right places. We want to build commercial corridors so that your neighborhood, you have a little commercial district, like an intersection, where you can have a dry cleaner and a pizza parlor and a laundromat so that you can walk to. We want to create these little commercial districts around the city of Tampa, similar to what Hyde Park provides for Hyde Park, but we want to be able to do that in multiple areas around the city of Tampa, that you have little commercial areas. That's the kind of development that we need in the city of Tampa.
You won't do it with the current code because of the parking regulations. Maybe as an example, at an intersection.
That's what we need to fix.
Right, at a particular intersection, again, my little Inner Bay and McDill intersection. Maybe you should have...
That's a great intersection.
It's a great intersection, but maybe, there's some developable land around that area. Maybe the parking minimums could be waived so that people could walk. It's not incentivizing people to walk. They already want to walk.
Well, it's funny you look at that because you've got that the plaza there. It's got all that street parking, that surface parking in the front. You imagine what that would look like if that was pushed to the front. If you had development in that area that was more cityscaped, that had parking in the rear. You had all those great restaurants. You had,
we would have our own Hyde Park Village.
100%.
And so many people in Tampa talk about, what a great example of a neighborhood it is. You've got mixtures of condos and apartments and townhouses.
It didn't just happen. It
Right.
didn't just
It was
happen.
a dedicated
Correct.
effort. And there's no reason why every neighborhood in Tampa couldn't enjoy their own little village, their neighborhood village.
Well, you need a combination of the people with the right vision, with the capital, and the access to the land to be able to make those visions come true.
And the appropriate city codes where you allow that, not necessarily even allow it. Don't get in the way.
Don't get in the way.
Don't get in the way.
And that 100% that should be the role of government, is not just not get in the way, but also facilitate. Again, we talked about the permitting. We need to do a better job of expediting and making these things happen. So we need to get, we need to be the driving force to allow these developers to do the right thing in these areas.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And I think there's a lot of good that's going to come out of this rewrite. And I think you're on the right track as well. I love the idea that, hey, look, maybe in past administrations and previous decades, it was appropriate for the city to have the position of, oh my gosh, you're a developer and you want to do this in Tampa? We'd love to have you.
Exactly.
Here's the red carpet and a blank check, right?
Yep.
That's not where we are
That's
today.
not what we are today.
We actually could have a little bit higher of a standard. We can hold developers accountable. And guess what? They'll still build here because this is a fantastic place to build. It's a great place to do business. People want to live here, and they're not going to go, oh, I can't build in Tampa. I'll go to Orlando. Okay, go to Orlando.
No,
they won't. They want to be here.
There's money to be made here, and you know what? Because that thinking of like build anything anywhere is what gets you to become Orlando, or
That's
what gets
exactly
you to become
right.
Miami.
If you don't have a standard for development and you give your whole city away, you will become a mess. Look at Orlando, roads and traffic and parking lots. It's a total mess.
It's a nightmare.
That does not have to be our story.
I grew up in Orlando, and it's a nightmare. And it didn't have to be that way. They knew it was coming.
Too much corporate interest, all the hotel flags, all these large scale developments coming in the Orange County probably going, oh my God, do whatever you want.
Right. Correct.
Yeah.
100%. They all got lured in by especially there's a lot of people that had money, that had land, that were able to make a quick buck. And it was about the quick buck instead of long-term development and long-term planning. There is smart and strategic money to be made in the city of Tampa. We have a lot of, even though we're largely built out, but there's a lot of areas that are potentially redeveloped. Look at the Sulphur Springs area with the old the Floorland, the mall up there,
right?
That the original Home Depot building, the Kmart property. Not to mention the dog track. Now that's actually a bridge because people say, why don't you do something with the dog track? People talk about personal property. People also don't understand because they come to all the time to the city as a government official. Why aren't you doing this here? Why aren't you doing that? I go, because we don't own that property. That's somebody else's property. We just can't tell the woman who owns the dog track that she's going to redevelop her property. She's perfectly happy with what she's got there today. And so
it's always a we and a they. Like we need to do this or they should do that. Well, the we and the theys might not be the person you should point the finger at.
Right.
But the city could always incentivize. The city can always promote. The city can always, like honestly what you're doing today, being on the show and talking about some of these grievances and some of these issues is so helpful because the public can hear it and kind of understand where you're at. Whereas if you don't do a show like this, what are they going to do? Watch a council meeting where where you're talking about
it's the best TV in Tampa.
Well, it is. Some days are better than others. A few recent episodes were very entertaining to say the least.
Yes.
So yes, Tampa, where it's at today. David, can you pull up a map? I really want to talk specifics about a higher standard of development. Also, as it relates to city-owned land, I believe a huge asset of the city government is the land we own. I think we should do
north downtown Tampa.
Well, so zoom into Blake High School, which is at the crest of the river where Armature Works is. Hold it right here. Put the little man on the intersection right north of 275. I've talked about this before. I may have hashed it out, but there's a Publix being built, and it's built like it should be in the suburbs. So right at that corner, you can't see it. You probably know what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
People listening probably know what I'm talking about.
It's a suburban-looking development.
Now, why was it built that way?
I don't know. I was not involved in that project. It's nice that we have a grocery store and that Publix, and Publix is an interesting.
We're getting Publix. Build whatever you want.
Yeah,
right.
But they're also an interesting company because for them, their requirement for a grocery store is very analytical. You either meet that requirement or you don't, and they don't make an exception. So when they decide to come into a market, they know the market exists. Sure. So they know this store is going to be a success.
Yeah. Well, Aldi's out there too.
Yeah. And you got what is the other one?
Sprouts.
Sprouts. over the armature works. Yeah, it's an interesting development. I wasn't part of the decision making on that. I would have rather seen more of a building with a urban style development.
Can't this all be shifted into conversation? I understand Publix has a box they fit in. Publix if I was gonna, I'm just a person with an opinion, right? Obviously, but Publix to me is one of the greatest Florida businesses. I think what they've done in the last few decades, I've grown up with them. I was at Publix last night. It is an unbelievable Florida-based company. The history of it, the family component, the way they service the community with their exceptional products. You never see mold. I mean, it's just a fantastic iteration of a grocery store.
Yeah.
But couldn't there be a conversation made with Publix for this particular piece of property? Look, Tampa's leaning more into a walkable urban environment. We would like you guys to consider building out your store no different than you would like you did on Water Street, where you've got a street-facing component, a cafe with an exterior, and put the parking lot in the back.
Or the what used to be a Greenwise and off of Howard,
exactly,
where you have the parking that was stacked with, so the store is stacked. Again, part of the problem is that Publix holds the cards on these developments. It's kind of like what department stores did with the mall developments. They held the cards, and they were the driving force in this discussion. I wasn't a part of that, so I can't speak to this Publix development, specifically how we got here.
Sure, and it's probably multi-years in the making, obviously.
Yeah, and I'm in negotiations, and this project, all of this public land, former the projects that used to be there, and the redevelopment.
And maybe they would have loved to, but for whatever reason, it was a planning organization that calls this the partnership with, I think, Related's the developer here.
Related's the development.
There's a lot of layers.
It's also the housing authority, and there's a lot of players in this particular project. How we got to this point, I can't tell. I can't speak. I can speak about a lot of issues. This particular one, I can't speak to.
I just think
this preceded me on council.
It's just a missed opportunity in my eyes, because it's a very strategic piece of land. You've got the high school, you've got UT right down the street, you've got Julian B. Lane Park,
Riverwalk,
a new Riverwalk, like an amazing opportunity to do a real gathering space grocery store. They've done it before. It's probably more complicated. I know it's more complicated than just, hey, why don't you face it towards the street? Obviously.
Well, I look at the Winn-Dixie on Swan all the time, and you see that just sea of asphalt in front of it.
Another great example.
And now you've got Aldi coming in there, but it would have been nice to have that property redeveloped and have it pushed to the front.
That one was private property, though.
Yeah.
This one was city-owned.
Yeah, again, this was more complicated because it was redevelopment of a housing authority project. So I don't know what the background. There's probably a lot more background that I'm not privy to on this one.
Well, there's a lot the city doesn't control. I just believe on city-owned land, we really should hold the cards tight.
Where we have some cards, again, if you go back into the downtown central business district, all that property between downtown and the interstate, the city owns a lot of that property. A lot of that surface parking area, we own so much property up there. So this is all area that we're going to extend that streetcar through as well. So I think we're going to be able to have a lot of negotiating power and be able to parlay some of this with developers to maybe help fund the streetcar. We have a lot of opportunity because you see a lot of the green space with the exception of the cemetery. We own a lot of the surface parking, and then the state of Florida owns the worst building in downtown off of Franklin Street, and the big parking lot in front of it. It's the one that's right there at the top in the middle.
Well, this entire sector we're looking at now, which is north downtown, essentially, in between, where the grid shifts from an angle to east to west.
So we own this all over here. We own all this parking all up here. We own a whole bunch of these little parcels that you see.
The city should be creative, some sort of land lease structure. Like, let's get some money for this land if you're going to sell it.
Well, eventually, and I think it'll probably be the next administration, but that's going to have to be an RFP. And again, we could probably use some of the revenue from this to fund the streetcar.
So many examples that I've talked to my grandfather about over literally generations shifted the course of history.
Oh, 100%.
Forest Hills Golf Course, a developer wanted to buy it and do homes. My grandfather stepped in as the city and bought it and figured out a way to do that.
Yeah, that's a great development too. And by the way, that is such a cherished, wonderful neighborhood. Forest Hills, it is such a great neighborhood.
But the city had a standard and didn't let it.
I love that neighborhood and the golf course, and it's still relatively affordable to be
fantastic.
Up there. It's a secret. I don't think people. We have another opportunity down here. We have an old parking garage just south of City Hall. that I think we have an opportunity to redevelop as well and work with the developer to get something in there.
So yeah, I mean, I think Curtis Hickson was actually the same story. My grandfather told me in the '60s, private developers wanted some of that land for condominiums, and the city bought it. Yep. And look at Curtis Hickson Park today, the epicenter of downtown parks. They actually wanted to
dig it out and make a marina in there.
So
I think it was one of the original proposals.
I just think we really need to be forward looking when it comes to city-owned land. The land is going to be so ungodly expensive now and in the future that the city's probably not going to be able to buy more of it. We really should try to hold on to what we have, and if it does get developed, the standard should be ridiculous, and partner with a developer that has a vision to build it out.
You know, it was a big mistake is in the Channelside district and on Water Street, the city, in the beginning, we did not acquire land for green space. So it is really void of the green space. Now, there's still a couple of opportunities there.
That's a good point, yeah.
But that was a big missed opportunity. Now, what I'm really excited about is Daryl's project on the north end of the channel there, Ybor Harbor. When he develops that, he's talking about putting a lot of green space on over here. And of course, he's going to have these big wide sidewalks. So there's going to be some opportunities there. And then in his gasworks area, he's got some green space coming in. But down in the Channelside district specific, we're really lacking.
On that eastern edge of downtown, go up a little bit, David. You really don't have a lot of parks. I've lived there on multiple
we need parks.
Phases of my life, but we do need more parks. Correct me if I'm wrong, but south, David, zoom in a little bit. Isn't the city doing a park south?
Tiny little park.
Yeah.
Little tiny park.
Pocket Park.
Pocket Park.
Where is it?
It's down there by the garage.
Yeah. I think it's where it'll have right here.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it'll have access from, what is that, 12th. You'll walk east past that little private residence, and then there'll be a little pocket park which will connect to Channelside Drive.
Yeah, and that's a CRA development because this is within the CRA. So we have, there's other opportunities too. You know, right now, Slater, who's head of the Expressway Authority, he's a visionary as well. And I don't know if you've had him on the show. Mm-hmm. He's a good guy. And the Expressway Authority owns and controls a lot of land, and they're looking at opportunities to have kind of symbiotic relationship with the city and opening up some green space and using some of under their interstate, and some of that, like where the dog park is just north of Channelside, between Ybor City and Channelside. Looking at expanding those opportunities. We see what's happening at Bay to Bay and the crosstown with the redevelopment there by that Ritz-Carlton project. So the Expressway Authority is doing a really good job of working with the city and working with the community to use their land for the greater good.
Well, thank God for some of these people, both in the private and public sector. Greg Slater is a great example as a visionary.
Yeah, I'm really impressed by him. He's a good dude.
He's been on the show. I need to have him back on. It was a fantastic conversation. To have a guy in charge of a highway system who has a greater bandwidth of describing the role of the highway. He doesn't just look at it as a simple, okay, this is a road through a city. We need to get people from A to B, right? It's so much more about the connected nature of the urban core, efficiency, and he's got an entire plan that really goes like the length of this entire Selman Expressway. He wants to do pickleball underneath, bike lanes. I mean, he's got a real good idea of how the Selman integrates within the urban core.
He's a great leader.
We got to be thankful for guys to have locally a guy like that.
No, I'm very impressed with him. Also, we're working with him because we're looking at expansion of the convention center eventually. So we're looking at, which way we're going to go. And part of the land that we're looking at is that area north of the Embassy Suites where you see that little loop and that parking lot there with Expressway owns some land over here between that loop and the convention center, or whether we go over Greco Plaza and double deck that. So there's a couple of options. Hey man,
don't touch Greco Plaza. What the heck?
Or of course out into the front there too, because there's a lot of opportunity there. But we're gonna have to do something with expanding to keep it a viable and competitive convention center. Somebody in the future is going to have to work on getting that building expanded.
Well, to me, you'd go up. Apparently, you cannot, engineering-wise. The building was not built for that, which is so. There's another short-sighted thing.
Well, the short-sighted was putting it where it's put. You can imagine if a couple of things that I think were major mistakes from people without vision and back in the day. I don't know. You're too young, but there was a time when they talked about relocating Tampa General up to the USF area. Well, that was a politically failed policy. What they should have done at the time, think about what Tampa Heights looked like at the time. If they had created a hospital district in Tampa Heights, which is high and dry, And I mean, we would have been a Cleveland Clinic area. You know, we could have had hotels and hospitals,
like a true medical district.
A medical district, yeah. And so that would have been an amazing opportunity for Tampa to really kind of recreate itself. And the same thing with that convention center. It could have been in Tampa Heights, or it could have been anywhere, and been in a much better place.
Or just build it with the future thinking capacity of, hey, we might want to add a few floors one day.
It's just, as you can see, it's boxed in, and it's difficult. And I think there was that land deal was an interesting land deal. We'll leave it at
that. I had on Santiago Carrata with Visit Tampa Bay, and he was describing
talk about another guy we're lucky to have.
Exactly.
If I had a tenth of the energy that he has, I mean,
he's just such a cheerleader and a champion of our city, and has so much faith and so much optimism. You got to have that. And then another person I wanted to mention, since we were talking about, is Daryl Shaw. He's on the complete private side of things.
But I'm gonna make the Daryl Shaw fan club. I'm gonna be president of the Daryl Shaw fan club. I mean, he was such a great. You know, you talk this guy who had this passion of architecture when he was a younger man. Then went into business and became successful in business and cashed out of that, and then revisited his love.
Yes.
So, and I am such a fan of his, because what he's done, he's not just in it. Now, he's a businessman, so of course he wants to make a buck, but he's in it to do it well, and he's in it to do it well for not just himself, but for the city of Tampa.
If he's in it to make a buck, he hides that fact very well with the way he's approaching the historic aspect of this development, and being thoughtful about how to integrate a brand new development in 2025 with probably the greatest historic district in the state of Florida. It's so expansive. It's so well respected. It has so much to offer. The stories are incredible. They are the stories of my family. And for him to come in and build it in a way that fits like a puzzle piece into a historic district, and then slowly ramps up to a more modern iteration of a development as you approach downtown. Thank God for a guy like that. Thank God it wasn't some greedy developer from Miami, going in and building something that is just completely against everything I'm talking about, any history at all.
We are so lucky because we have.
Miami.
I left that alone. We are so lucky because we have Venick. What a visionary person he was for the city of Tampa. We have Ellison. And we have these folks that Arden. We've all these folks that are just really good for the city of Tampa. And I'm not probably list another 6 of them that have really invested in a way that nobody else has done in the past.
Yeah,
they've really taken ownership, and they wanted to leave a mark on the city of Tampa that really lived beyond their life cycle and span here. We're lucky to have them here because I think there was decades and decades we didn't have that. We were overlooked, and people didn't have the vision. And you have a Jeff Venick that came in and worked in partnership and created a capital group to be able to do the kind of investment that recreated a city. You have people like Daryl that are coming in and really seeing things that maybe some of us had seen in the past but didn't have the ability to make it happen, and he's making these things happen. It's quite incredible. It really is. The city of Tampa is we are lucky in so many ways. We're lucky to be blessed with being in a beautiful area surrounded by water. We're lucky with the exception of a few intermittent hurricanes, we're lucky to have wonderful weather.
It's the price we pay.
And we're in the diversity of the city. I chose to raise my kids here because I wanted them to live in a culturally diverse working city, a place that valued the diversity, and then it functioned and it functioned well. We don't have a lot of the issues that other places have, and this is what I valued that as a younger man, and I wanted my kids to be raised in an area that had that element. And I think Tampa is a great place, and the story has, several chapters have been written, but there's a whole bunch of more to come.
There's a whole bunch more to come, and that story of diversity really is what makes this place special, and it was very unique at the time. I mean, you had a bunch of different cultures all living together, all working together at a time, soon after the Civil War, when you didn't really see a lot of that.
Right.
So diversity actually is a part of the Tampa story, very interestingly.
And it was all with blood and sweat. And, And it wasn't glamorous.
No.
Building city out of the swamps, with the challenges they had, and working the way they did, and it was It wasn't a glamorous and it wasn't a fancy place back then, but they built the foundation that we're living in today.
Everyone has their part. We've talked about what Shaw's doing and what Vinnick has done and Greg Slater with the Selman. I just want to see something big and bold with the city, especially, it's probably too late with this West Riverfront, but when you have that much land to be developed, city controlled, as I understand, I just wanted to see something a little bolder, something that really addresses the housing crisis. I'm not saying the city should build it. I'm saying the city should work with a developer who can do something extreme, really, really turn the needle. I was just doing some research. I'm going to do a write-up on affordability here related to homeownership and rent. And the statistics that came out from the federal government said our demand for units, for housing units, and this is arbitrary, but it was something like 50,000, let's just say, and we're building 9 or 10,000. So it's like if we don't do something extreme and bold, we're going to probably always have housing issues. And we don't have a lot of the large economic engines here that can support super high wage growth in the short term. And because we have so much demand, and that's probably not going to stop, we're always going to have an affordability issue moving forward.
Well, again, I'm a market person, and I think the market dictates. I think that you see some softening in the market right now. Our vacancy rates are up, our rents are down, from where they were a couple of years ago. I think the market will dictate some of this, and I think again, the government can't get in the way of the market. We're not good at it. We can't pivot back fast enough. We can't move fast enough. The market's always going to act in a more decisive way. Money will follow where it's going to be able to make more money. What we can do is, we can provide infrastructure. We can provide the transportation. We
lay
can
the foundation.
We can lay the foundation. When we're building out these projects, like what we've just talked about, all these visionary projects in the city, what the city can do is we can lay the pipes. We can build the street grids. We can reconnect the streets. We can do those things that only the government can do, and then allow these developers to do what they do to do smart development in the right area. Again, good projects in the right area. That's what we need to encourage. And I think that the private sector is the place to make that happen.
And I think you're so spot on. It really is the city's responsibility to lay that foundation. It's not the city's responsibility to take it further, frankly. The city needs to provide those basic services in an adequate way and then let the market do the rest.
Correct. Well, because we also can't pick winners and losers. And if the city gets involved in that and we start confiscating one person's money out of their taxes to give to a company, we're picking winners and losers. We can provide a level playing field. Again, we can make sure that the infrastructure is there for these projects to move along. We can make sure that people can get to and from these projects. We can make sure that our schools are, at the standards that they should be. We can make sure the sidewalks are there, that the grids are all connected, that we have everything that is needed for these projects to be successful. But then that's when the private sector's got to pick it up from there. They got to make these things work.
And because we live in such a beautiful place with so much to offer and all the exciting things we've talked about today, we should all have faith that it is there and the demand is there for the developers to create these cool projects.
We've got NFL football, we've got hockey, we have an incredible art museum, we've got a world-class performing arts center, we have the beautiful Florida Aquarium, we have Ybor City, and we may have baseball before you know it. So there's a lot of reasons to come and live in the city of Tampa.
What are you telling me, Mr. Alan Clendenin?
I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, man.
We'll see.
Listen, thank you for being here today. This was awesome.
It was a pleasure.
This was cool.
I enjoy it.
Thank you. It went by too quick. We need to have you back on. This was a great conversation. I also wanted to ask you real quick, Chair pro term of City Council. So you're the person that's essentially in charge of the operations?
No,
how does that work?
I'm the vice chair.
The vice chair.
So I'm like the vice president. I just wait for the president, the chair to die.
Yeah, you got the good job, man.
So, yeah,
you got the title, but no responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. So so if he steps out of the room, I become chair. That's pretty much the glamour of that position.
Okay, got it. Well, listen, thank you for all you do. Thank you for coming on the show.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having this podcast, because information is power, and being able to share these kind of stories. It's something that is important for the citizens to be able to see this.
100%. Thanks again.
Take care.
All right. Bye, everybody.